Hey there, home chefs. Today we are going American. Chicken pot pie is a staple dish that is often store-bought, but everyone has their own recipe for. We're mixing things up a bit by making it gluten-free as well. When I host guests with a gluten intolerance, I find it a shame to make something different just for them, when a gluten-free version could be enjoyed by everyone. And in this case, we've got a pie crust that is just as flaky and tasty as its gluten counterpart to go with a delicious pot pie. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I hope there's something new here for you to learn today. Let's get to our first stage, food prep. The key component is that gluten-free pie crust, so we'll need some gluten-free flour. Add about 350 grams into a food processor, along with 1 1/4 teaspoon of Xantham Gum, this is a gluten alternative stabilizer to help things bind together, and 150 grams of very cold butter. Cold is vital here. We need the butter melting in the oven, not before, to get this pastry just right. Then begin blending. Processor is better than a whisk here, as the blade cuts through the butter. Then, once it's a breadcrumb consistency, we're using an egg to help the binding, and pulsing that a few more times. When that's all mixed in, put everything into a wide bowl and begin mixing with a tablespoon or two of very cold water. Keep mixing and add the water a tablespoon at a time. We want this pastry only just sticking together to achieve that flaky pie crust style, so don't add too much water too early. I used about 4 tablespoons before it started to come together like this, and that's about where we want it. When you're at that stage, drop the dough onto some cling film and press together into a disc-like shape. Wrap up tight and leave in the fridge until it's ready to roll so the butter stays cold. Next up is the main ingredient, the chicken. The beauty of chicken pot pie is any old leftover chicken will still be delicious, so it's up to you what chicken to use. I'll leave a link to my previous video for some perfectly poached chicken breasts for you to try, but for now I'm just using oven roasted chicken thighs to do the job. You can opt for either diced or shredded chicken meat for your pie. Diced chicken matches the textures of the other veg, but shredded meat I think takes on the gravy much better, so I'm shredding the chicken before putting to the side to cool. Now onto the veg. You can chuck a lot into a pot pie, so I'm just using some core ones for now. Start with a leek. You get the oniony flavour and it combines with chicken wonderfully. Be sure to save some money by buying untrimmed. It's the easiest thing to halve and wash out the soil. We are home chefs after all. Then slice along both the green and white parts to get the colour and flavour nicely balanced. Once that's done, the other core veg for me is carrot. It's a great base for sweetness and texture. Slice them into quarters and chop into nice even chunks. And that's basically all you really need. Optionals could be sweet corn, mushrooms or peppers. Most people opt for onion. I'd recommend grating some shallots if you do, but I think the leek give enough flavour on its own. And with that, it's time for stage 2, cooking. Grab a deep pan or Dutch oven and drop in about 30 grams of butter over a medium heat. When it starts to bubble, add in the veg and a generous hit of salt and garlic powder. Let that all soften for 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll add 3 tablespoons of the gluten-free flour to form a bit of a roux. If you don't have the flour, you can skip this and cook the stock with the lid off to help reduce the sauce. Cook the roux for about a minute, and then add small quantities of chicken stock and stir continuously until a smooth sauce forms. A bit of white wine here would also add a nice twang. Once all the stock is added, I'd say about 300 milliliters, we can start flavouring to our preference. Go with what you like. I'm adding thyme and soy sauce, and then Bacon Lardons for a bit of extra saltiness, but also a delicious combo with the chicken. At this point, bring the heat down to a simmer, and cover and leave for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally to prevent sticking. Now, remove the lid, and I recommend adding some Creme Fraiche at this point. It thickens it up a bit, which I like, but mostly it's that creaminess that makes it for me. Now we can bring in the chicken, get everything mixed together, and cook for a few more minutes. The final step is turn off the heat and add some frozen peas. I love the taste of peas, so I highly recommend it, but don't use fresh as they will turn to mush in the oven. Set that aside to cool off a little, and let's assemble our pastry. Lay down some parchment paper and sprinkle across some gluten-free flour. Then, place your dough. It's best to take it out of the fridge 10 minutes beforehand so it's soft enough to roll. Add a touch more flour, and a tip I was told was to lay another layer of parchment paper to ease the rolling process. I realise at this moment the quantity is actually for 2 pastry lids, so let's cut that in half. And then back to rolling. I can confirm 2 layers did not make things easier for me, but the underlayer does, and you'll see why in a sec. Roll out the dough, turning every so often, until you get to about just under a centimetre thick. And don't stress about bits breaking off, it's meant to be crumbly and we can rebuild if needed. Once your pastry is thin enough, grab the pot you'll be using and cut around it, giving a centimetre or two extra diameter, as this pastry is going to shrink in the oven. Then, we can lift this out easily thanks to the parchment paper underneath, and simply peel off your perfect pastry lid. Let's give the lid something to cover. Grab your pot and fill it almost to the top with your filling. Leave a little gap for bubbles and steam, and then crown your pot in all its glory. Give the edges a bit of a crimp for style, but most importantly is that the edges are completely sealed, or we may get some overflowing in the oven. Once you're happy, a vital step is to create a vent in the pastry. Without it, you may be redecorating your oven with a chicken pot pie wallpaper. So grab a paring knife and make 2 clean incisions. You can also use the back of the knife to add some decorative lines if you're a handy artist, unlike me. And then lastly, brush over with a beaten egg for that golden colour, and it's ready for the oven. Bake at 220 degrees Celsius or 420 degrees Fahrenheit for about 35 minutes or until the pastry is golden brown. And out we have a beautiful chicken pot pie that's got a perfect buttery, flaky crust topping that is not only gluten-free, but as pastry is not my strength, if I can make it, it's got to be the easiest pastry to make. And now it's on to my favourite part. Stage 3, plating. Now, there's not too much to plate here, as the pot pretty much does the heavy lifting. So let's gently place the scorching hot pot on a bright plate and bring it aside. One classic side with pie is mashed potato, at least it is in the UK. So to jazz it up, I recommend getting a piping bag to give it a bit of style. I make mashed potato a lot, so be sure to check out my short here on how to get the perfect creamy mash every time. And doesn't that look good for pie and mash? We can put the cherry on top by removing a circle from the pie crust. Check that out, not too shabby for gluten-free. And then top the mash with the crust, like a wafer on a soft serve. And now we have access to that wonderful pie filling. Yummy. But as I promised, maybe pastry is not your thing. And so for another great gluten-free option, we can anglicize this by using the mash as the pie lid. In true British style, we'll bake it with a topping of mashed potato. For extra style points, it's a good idea to pipe across with a star nozzle, as the more ridges we have, the better caramelization we'll get in the oven. Once the filling is covered, place in the oven for 10 or 15 minutes until you get this amazing browning on the mash. And I have to say, as much as I rate the gluten-free pastry, this may actually be the winner for me. Getting a bit of texture into the mash combined with that moist, delicious chicken filling, you can't tell me you're not tempted by this. And with that, chicken pot pie is done. Let me know how you get on, and if you want to see more gluten-free recipes, let me know in the comments. Remember to subscribe to get notified of my next video, and until then, keep cooking and may the Zen be with you.